Welcome into this week's episode of Three True Values Big Board. I'm your host, James Fletcher, and we are going to take you through a mini mock draft this week. That's right. We have run the projections on Tankathon. We are just over a week away, about 10 days from the NBA's draft lottery, when we will know officially what the order will be on night one. Of course, we're back to the 2-night system in the NBA draft. I'm kind of a fan of it. Gives you time to kind of reset, think about round two, put out a mock draft for the second round, really evaluate who the best players are. There's also the potential for more player movement over those 24 hours as teams kind of position themselves where they want to be. Makes it a little bit easier to line up trades, figure out what you want to do as you talk to agents about where on the board their player is expected to go and who you want as your two ways for the next season. A lot of strategy that can go into it. But of course, our focus is primarily going to be on the first night of the NBA draft. Like I said, we're about 10 days out from that draft lottery, which will take place to set the top 14 picks. As we know, the way that the lottery is set up right now has led to widespread tanking. And that's something that the NBA wants to fix. But this draft class was just so good that I think you could have just about done anything to tanking, and teams still would have done everything they could to angle for this number one pick. And as we went to Tankathon, which is the best place to simulate the lottery, if you're looking to create a mock draft, if you're looking to just see where your team might pick in the order, you can sim lottery. You can head over to their mock draft, sim the lottery from there, and it will give you their picks, their projections based on where the teams land. But we've hit it one time here, and it's spit out an order, and we're going to go through that order and talk about the top 14 picks, the potential lottery picks in this NBA draft. At this point, as we know, some guys are going to go through the combine. Some guys could continue to withdraw late in this process. We'll see what happens with that, but we know the top players. We know they're going to be involved in the draft. And so, as it spits out the order here, we have the Wizards landing the number one overall pick. That's big for them as they continue their rebuild. They're looking to take a step forward next season with Anthony Davis on the roster, Trae Young there as well. Landing the number one pick would be massive for them as they look to kickstart things, maybe gives them the motivation they need to sign extensions for Young, for Davis, in order to kind of push things forward and make sure that this team is contending for the playoffs in the 26-27 season. Number two pick spits out the Indiana Pacers. They don't move from their pre-lottery odds, along with, of course, the Washington Wizards, which finished last in the NBA this year. So number one and number two, we've got some chalk. We know where they're going to be. The Indiana Pacers, of course, that pick landing in the top four is going to be a massive sigh of relief for fans if it drops that way on May 10th, because they only own that pick protected 1 through 4. But as they land the second spot in the lottery order, they get the same odds at a top 4 pick, the same odds for the number 1 pick that we see from the Washington Wizards and the Brooklyn Nets. But as a result of being second in the reverse standings, the lowest they can drop if 4 teams move up into the lottery ahead of them is 6th. Well, that means there's 2 positions that they could theoretically land in that would transfer that pick to the Los Angeles Clippers. So if you're the Clippers, you're hoping to see that name pop up and transfer to you before we get to the top 4 picks. But in this scenario, the Pacers keep it. That'll be big for them as they look to bounce back. Injury-riddled season, of course. Tyrese Halliburton will miss the entirety of it after leading the Pacers to the NBA Finals just a year before. So they're going to bounce back. They bring in Zubac to replace Miles Turner. That, of course, is the trade that resulted in this pick being protected the way that it is, potentially going to the Clippers. But if it lands in the top 4, you're talking about adding to that core. Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam, Ivica Zubac, the role players that played so well for them in the playoffs a year ago. Now you're adding one of the highly touted players from this class to that mix. The third pick in this simulation went to the Utah Jazz, who jump up one spot. Brooklyn gets pushed down the board here. The Jazz at number 3, and the Memphis Grizzlies at number 4 in these lottery odds. They start at 6th in the lottery odds, so they have moved up the board as well. That means that below, the only two teams that moved are the Brooklyn Nets, who dropped 2 spots. They, of course, had the same odds entering this as the Wizards and the Pacers, but they dropped to number 5, 2 spots down from where they would have picked if we just set things at the end of the season. And the Sacramento Kings drop 1 spot as a result of the Grizzlies making it into this top 4. So not a lot of movement here in this simulation. We'll see if that holds up. We've seen some teams make big leaps up the board here in recent years. The Mavericks, of course, getting the number 1 pick last year from relatively far down the board, below 10 in the original seeding. They did not have high percentage chance of doing it, but of course they only run it once. And so you just need the luck of that one draw to get the top pick in this thing. So if you're 1 through 14, you have some hope that you could land your pick of these generational prospects that we talk about at the top of this draft. Let's get into it. Let's talk about this mock draft now. We're going to go through these top 14 picks. We'll, of course, do plenty with the NBA draft in the coming weeks. We'll do stuff with Jamie Shaw. We'll probably bring in my friend Derek Lewis to talk you through different mock draft scenarios. We'll alternate. We'll break down our mock drafts, player evaluations, all kinds of stuff is on the way. The NBA Combine is coming up not too far away. We will ramp up draft coverage here. This is kind of the start. We're going to get you a basis of where things stand after the college basketball season, with the NBA season, regular season at least, in the books, what you need to be looking for right now as the evaluation process continues to ramp up. So as we get into it, we're going to go to the number 1 overall pick here, and I still believe this is AJ Dybonsa. We'll send him to the Washington Wizards, who, of course, in our simulated lottery landed the number 1 pick. AJ Dybonsa, big season at BYU, the scoring output, the ability to create his own shot. He really took over after Richie Saunders went down. Yes, the results went up and down from there, but they were playing high-level competition, and he really kept them in just about all of those games down the stretch there. It's kind of a shame that we didn't get to see him play with Richie Saunders for the entirety of the year and see how deep this team would have been able to go. They were playing really well when Saunders went down, and it just kind of became a struggle. It became a 2-man show. Teams were throwing 3, even 4 at times bodies at AJ Dybonsa. Pretty much every offensive possession makes it really difficult, but he still got to his spots. He still knocked down shots, and he didn't tank efficiency wise. Obviously wasn't the most efficient season, but like I said, when you've got that many guys guarding you, when you're the focal point in the way that he was, that's very difficult to do, to be efficient. At number 2, we're going to go Darren Peterson here for the Indiana Pacers. I think that he is just a perfect fit for this specific team picking in this spot. Of course, we talked about them just a minute ago with Tyrese Halliburton. We talk about Pascal Siakam. They have Ivica Zubac at the center position. But the ability for them to bring in another guard who can put the ball in his hands, but also would be able to work off the ball, which I think is going to be huge for Darren Peterson's development. I liked his off-ball reps way more than his on-ball reps during his time at Kansas. I thought that he was actually really successful in those situations, being able to catch and shoot, being able to catch it and drive from there. You're playing alongside Tyrese Halliburton. You're going to get a lot of those opportunities. I think it'll be big for him to develop alongside and then get some reps. He really wouldn't have to run the point guard at all unless they just want to develop that part of his game with TJ McConnell there, with Andrew Nembhard on that roster. There's enough depth that you're not relying on Darren Peterson to day one come in and be perfect at a lot of things. You're just asking him to do the stuff that he's excellent at already and then slowly work in more stuff. I think it's a really good fit there and a really good system. Come into somewhere that has culture, that has, uh, already achieved success, put this guy into it. And I think that might be the best trajectory for him to reach stardom in the NBA. At number 3, we have the Utah Jazz. We're going to give them Caleb Wilson here. Here's the reason why. I think that a lot of boards have Cameron Boozer still higher than Wilson. I've actually moved Wilson up my board going through my postseason film evaluation, looking at both guys. I really, really like what I've seen from Wilson. The more I watch it, the more that I do think that it translates, the more that I think that his concerns can be easily fixed. I do think that you get him into a gym with an NBA staff. They're working through an entire offseason. They work through 2 off seasons. I think you're going to see that three-pointer at least become something that you have to respect. I don't know if he's ever going to be a 40% three-point shooter. Yes, we've seen some big leaps in three-point percentage from guys in the past. I'm not going to just predict that that happens. But he does remind me a lot of Pascal Siakam, of different players like that who can come in and are going to use their athleticism and also their impeccable timing. It's not just that Caleb Wilson gets off the floor higher than you. He gets off the floor quicker. He gets off the floor at the right time every time. Whether that's skying up for the rebound, for a block, the dunks that, of course, he's become known for, even in the mid-range. I think that's the key to his mid-range game. He gets off the floor and rises above the defender so quickly, and before the defender can gather, that he gets that shot off every time, and he's able to really just kind of flick it into the basket above the defense. Really hopeful for what he can become as he continues to fill out, continues to develop. That's not to disparage anything about Cam Boozer. I think that this has become, particularly between these two, but really these top 4 prospects, it's become so polarized that you either have to be an AJ DeBonsa guy, you have to be a Darren Peterson guy. There's no in between. You can't like both players. You can't believe that both are going to be stars. You can't even believe that both players are going to be successful in the NBA. Same with Cameron Boozer and Caleb Wilson. You can't think that the UNC guy and the Duke guy are both going to be good in the NBA. I just don't think that's the case. I think that all 4 of these guys have a really high percentage chance of becoming successful. To what degree, a lot of times already depends on where you are situated, who you're around, and how you develop from the point that you are. All of these guys have flaws in their game. All of them. AJ DeMonsa needs to make better reads, probably a little bit of room to improve on defense. Darren Peterson, of course, the injuries have been an issue. Some of the answers that he's given in press conferences have been concerning. He wasn't efficient when he did play in big minutes for Kansas. Caleb Wilson, yeah, there's concerns about that outside shot. Is he going to be able to just dunk every time down the floor in the NBA against bigger, stronger athletes, grown men that he's going to be facing as a teenager? Cameron Boozer, different but similar concern. He uses physicality. He just pushes people around, goes up, flips it in. Is he going to be able to do that against better and better players in the NBA? Now, I think that Cameron Boozer, of course, as the analytic darling, has even created more of a debate against himself and Caleb Wilson. I think that what it comes down to with these two teams, though, as we figure out in this specific mock draft, who should go 3, who should go 4, I think Caleb Wilson to the Jazz makes more sense because of what they already have in place. You have Walker Kessler at center. You have Jaren Jackson Jr., who you just gave up a lot of draft capital for, at the 4. Lauri Markkanen is going to start at the 3. He's your star player that you're trying to build around. You're trying to kickstart towards success this season. Where is the room for Cameron Boozer in that? You look at the type of team that they've been building, and I just don't see much room for him to come in and play alongside any of those players. Caleb Wilson, while yes, he still positionally doesn't really fit there. If we were going best position for the Jazz to take, you might really consider a Wagler and Acuff. But right now I've got a tier break there that's a pretty hard tier break, and I don't want to dip into that. I don't think that you draft purely based on what you need today. I think you can kind of figure it out as you go. If they decide that Caleb Wilson or Cameron Boozer is a generational prospect, then yes, they would be in their right move to consider Walker Kessler's future, to consider, can we flip one of these other two bigs that we have in our system? What do we do moving forward? But that depends on how you view. Maybe you even flip this pick. Maybe you do go from 3 down the board to about 6, 5, 6. Get Acuff or Wagler, even Kingston Flemings at that point in the draft. But you bring in more assets to do so. Maybe that's the path that the Jazz should take here. Regardless, though, if they do pick who's on the board and we're not projecting trades in this mock draft, I think that Caleb Wilson at least gives you more optionality around what you already have there at this point. And that leaves the Grizzlies at 4 to take Cameron Boozer, who I think the Grizzlies are in a different situation. They've kind of cleared out the roster. Yes, Zach Edey is there. Yes, Cedric Coward is there. But beyond that, there's no pieces that you define how you are going to play basketball. So you can bring in a Cameron Boozer and say, look, we're going analytics focus. We're going to pound the ball inside. We're going to focus on the half court offense. You can draft Caleb Wilson and say, look, we're going to fly up and down the floor. We're going to try to dunk the ball as many times as we can. And we're going to just kind of fly with it. You can do all kinds of different things with where their roster is in the rebuild versus where the Jazz are. So I think that they will be more than happy if they land in this spot to take either of those two players at number 4. At number 5, we've got the Brooklyn Nets, and we're going to take Keaton Wagler. Yes, they brought in multiple point guards last year, so this is kind of it's a bad position if you're the Nets. You did not want to fall to 5. Maybe they're a team to look at. Maybe they want to trade up to number 3 with the Jazz in this scenario. But as they are here at number 5, I think you go Wagler, unless you believe that Acuff is just a superstar who's going to lead your franchise forward. I think you go Wagler here because we know he can play the 2. I think that he's actually better at the 2. Yes, he can handle the ball, but I think having him alongside a primary ball handler, making him the secondary ball handler, actually gives him the best chance at success. You look at what he did while he was next to Kylan Boswell. I think that we focus too much on the fact that the ball was in his hands and not that Boswell is the guy when there was pressure on, Boswell gets it up the floor, and then we run the offense through Keaton Wagler. I'm interested to see what position he plays. I think it'll depend on the team that drafts him, but I do like him in that shooting guard role, particularly as a secondary ball handler. He will have the ball in his hands plenty. Maybe depending on the big where he gets drafted, he can be in that Jamal Murray role where, yes, you're playing the point guard, but you're not really the point guard. Jokic is the point guard on the Nuggets. He's the center, but he's the one facilitating the offense, making the passes. He's top in the league in assists. Jamal Murray, yes, he dribbles the ball up the court and he makes that first pass, but he's operating as a shooting guard a lot of times. I think that that's a role that Keaton Wagler could excel in during his career. But again, we'll see where he lands, who he ends up playing alongside during the course of his career. We've got him going to the Nets here. He would get to play next to Yegor Demon, Nolan Traore, both drafted last year. We'll see what happens there. At number 6, we have the Sacramento Kings. I think that if they land here, they would be thrilled with Darius Acuff. They've been looking for the point guard of the future. Of course, they had Tyrese Halliburton on their roster at one point, traded him for Domantas Sabonis because they wanted to pair that big with De'Aaron Fox. Good idea. You want a point guard and a center. Although Sabonis and Fox never really meshed. It was just two different systems. You had a half-court big who wanted to just kind of battle inside, grab rebounds, and put up shots versus a point guard who wanted to get out and fly and run up and down the court. Now De'Aaron Fox is in San Antonio, and they're looking for the point guard of the future. Darius Acuff, I mean, look, he was a star at Arkansas, absolutely unstoppable on the offensive end. The efficiency was off the chart for a point guard. He's got a little bit of ways to go on the distribution. I think that he got much better at it during his time at Arkansas. But he's going to face double teams. He's going to face new defenses in the NBA, and he's going to have to figure out where the open man is and how to get the ball to them early, not once he runs into the wall and no longer has the option to score. I think that's the next step in his game. We'll see if he can achieve that at the next level. At number 7, I think that the Hawks would also be very happy to land Kingston Flemings here. I think he's a point guard who kind of fits the mold of what they're trying to do now. They're going longer, they're going bigger, and Kingston Flemings fits that mold, at least up against Darius Acuff, and also a guy who's not going to come in and just take all the shots. He's going to facilitate. He can play with another ball handling guard. He showed that at Houston. We'll see how the 3-point shot continues to develop. Can he keep that up? That's going to be the key for him, I think, is keeping that 3-point shot at an efficient number throughout his career. We saw it kind of tail off a little bit. He started red hot. That was the concern on him coming into college as well. We know he's going to play defense, which is also something that has kind of fit with what the Hawks are looking for from particularly their role players. This guy obviously has potential to go beyond that, but it's a real foundation coming out of the Trae Young era. They're trying to go kind of 180 here. They don't want an offense-only point guard. So I think Kingston Flemings is a great fit for that system. We look at number 8 and the Dallas Mavericks. And I think that of the options here, if you land at 8, there's still some really good players. There's still some super high potential left on the board. And I think that if you're the Mavericks, you've got to lean into Mikel Brown and the potential that he could be a star point guard in this league. He's got size. He, of course, has the offensive punch that you need. Dealt with back injuries during his freshman season at Louisville, but we saw him at the international level before that play really well. One of the best players on that Team USA team for the U19s. Comes into Louisville. He had stretches, he had performances where you said, wow, this is the guy that we knew. And then he had others where he really struggled, and it felt like that back was really kind of hampering his ability to get into it. So you have concern there about that back, but if they feel comfortable with the medical, I think that the Mavericks would, again, be very happy to pair this with Cooper Flagg. Don't make Cooper Flagg be on the ball, even with Kyrie Irving potentially coming back next year. If they choose to keep him in the fold, be kind of the veteran leader of that team, I like the thought of putting Irving next to Mikel Brown. We know how well Irving played next to Luka Doncic, who was a bigger point guard than Brown, but Brown's still a big point guard who would be able to come in there and learn from one of the best in the game at the distribution, getting into the lane, all the little things that Kyrie does so well. At number 9, we have the Chicago Bulls, and we're going to go with Braden Burries, here. Braden Burries at Arizona had an outstanding season. He's really good, I think, at the drive, the slash, and setting you up with his last move, being able to make the right move each time down the floor in that set to get to open space. He, of course, struggled in the last game of the NCAA tournament, but really that team struggled top to bottom. They did not play well in their last NCAA tournament game. But I do think that he showed enough through the season where you said, okay, this is a top 10 guy in the class. I don't think there's really any question about that. He's got a little bit of combo guard to him. I think he's primarily a shooting guard, but I do think he can be a secondary ball handler in certain actions and certain sets, and that's going to add a lot of intrigue for a team like the Chicago Bulls, who has Josh Giddey at the point guard spot. Now you add in another guy to that mix at the shooting guard spot, and you can really start to get things rolling there in that backcourt. At number 10, we've got the Milwaukee Bucks, and I've got them taking Nate Ament here. Look, if they end up losing Giannis Antetokounmpo, if he ends up being traded during this offseason, and you're at the number 10 pick, I think you swing for the fences. I don't see any reason that you would take one of these veteran guys who's in this mix, or even one of these guys who we kind of know what he's going to be. And yeah, he'll kind of steady the ship. But if you're the Bucks, swing for the fences in your first pick after Giannis Antetokounmpo. It also fits the mold of what they've drafted even during the Giannis era, which has kind of led us to this point where they're not a contender right now, even with Giannis. They need to figure out what to do moving forward. Are they just going to be content to try to make it into the playoffs each year with Giannis and ride through his career in the goodwill that they have there? Or do they end up trading him? Do they end up kind of hitting a complete reset, trying to bring in as many assets as they can and starting pretty much from scratch on this roster? I don't think it's a smart pick if Giannis stays to take Nate Ament here, because he is going to need time to develop, need time to figure out the confidence level, need time to figure out the physicality of the NBA. But it's also what they've done. You look at AJ Johnson, Tyler Smith, even MarJon Beauchamp in the past. This is the type of player that they've continued to draft during the Giannis era, looking for these young guys who need to fill out, who need a little bit of more development before they're ready to contribute at the NBA level. So I think they'll be very interested in Nate Ament, regardless of the scenario that they're in. I think it's an interesting fit there between those two. At number 11, we have the Golden State Warriors, and I've got them taking Yaxel Lindeborg here. Look, this is a team that's trying to maximize the last years of Steph Curry, kind of the opposite situation that we have with the Bucks. If you can get a guy who can come in and make an instant impact, immediate, day one, you know what you're getting from him, older guy, right into the rotation, I think that that's something that the Warriors have to take a serious look at, particularly at a cheap cost with what their roster is around Steph Curry moving forward. We'll see about Steve Kerr's future here in the coming weeks. We'll see what they do at that head coaching spot. But it does sound like they want to build one more contender around Steph Curry. I think the only real way to do that is to draft veteran guys who can make an immediate impact. Yaxel Lindeborg fits into that mold. At number 12, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder. The rich get richer here, and they've got a chance to draft for potential. So we have one team that can draft for potential, another team drafting to win right now with a veteran piece, and we go right back to potential, but in a different way, because this is the best team in the NBA this past season. But because they have all these draft picks at their disposal, they can kind of burn them on high upside guys who can take a year or two to develop off the bench, work mostly off the floor in practices and figure it out. I think that's why it's a perfect spot for Jaden Quaintance, who took a long recovery from his ACL injury, starting to get back into basketball activities now. It seems like a little bit more healthy. We'll see how his medicals pop up. That's going to be huge for his draft stock, whether he can be a potential lottery pick this year. But a guy who has long been considered one of the best prospects for his age group, long been considered one of the best defensive prospects at that center position. Yes, a little bit undersized, but he's big, he's strong, he protects the rim at an elite level. We didn't get to see him on the court for Kentucky, so I think he's been kind of forgotten about here. And yes, of course, injury concerns are big, but if you're the Thunder, I think in this position, you're the perfect team to take that chance on him, because you can almost give him a red shirt if he needs more time to get healthy. If you want to get your doctors in to really evaluate him and make sure he's 100%, you can do that if you're the Thunder and not really miss out on anything over the next season. At number 13, we have the Miami Heat. We're going to go with LeBaron Philon here. They've got a hole at that point guard spot. They've tried to kind of do the Tyler Hero and Norm Powell thing. It just doesn't work. They've already made it clear that they're not really going to play those two together. And I think that probably means that one of them has to go this offseason. We'll see which one that is. Of course, Tyler Hero is still under contract. Norm Powell becomes a free agent, but depending on what you can do with a Norm Powell contract, you might move Hero out in a trade. That's all up in the air at this point, though. What is clear, though, is you're going to need a point guard beside one of those two who plays shooting guard. So LeBaron Philon makes a lot of sense here at 13, because you've got your big spot kind of locked up. You've got Bam Adebayo, you've got Khalil Ware. You like what you've gotten from some of your wings there. I think LeBaron Philon makes sense for Miami. And our last pick that we're going to go through today at 14 to the Charlotte Hornets. I've got Hannes Steinbach. I'm still a big fan of his. That growth spurt that we saw, I thought at the end of the year he was protecting the rim a little bit better, starting to figure out how to use his length and height on the defensive end. Started to grow quite a bit, I thought, there down the finish. We know on offense that he is a solid option. We know that he's a really good screen setter, and we know that he is one of the best rebounders in this class. I think it'd be really interesting to add him into that front court rotation with with Moussa Diabate, with Ryan Kalkbrenner. You add this guy in, he can play a little bit of the four. We saw him play with another center at Washington. You put him next to Diabate, who's a little bit of an undersized center. You put him in at center when he's out of the game. I think there's a lot of versatility that he could provide to that Charlotte group. When we come back next week, we will bring you more college basketball and NBA content. We're breaking down all things offseason right here on 3 True Values. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Big Board. We will be back next week with you to talk you through everything you need to know across the sport.